In 1958, a woman in Ohio would never leave her house without lipstick. Not to the grocery store, not to take out the trash, not even to answer the door for the mailman. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away in Paris, a woman of the same age might wear nothing on her face but a swipe of cream and a bar of soap and still be considered the more put together of the two. Two women, same decade, same goal to look beautiful, to be respected, to feel in control of how the world saw them. And yet their morning routines could not have looked more different. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly why these two cultures split so dramatically on something as personal as a daily face, and what that split actually says about how each society understood womanhood itself. So, what happened? Why did two cultures, both obsessed with beauty, end up with completely opposite daily habits? The answer goes deeper than lipstick shades and powder compacts. It runs straight through post-war economics, advertising psychology, and two very different ideas about what a woman owed the world when she walked out her front door. After World War II, America did not just rebuild its economy, it rebuilt an entire identity around consumer perfection. The suburban housewife became a national symbol of success, and the cosmetics industry moved fast to attach itself to that symbol. According to the United States Department of Commerce, the American makeup industry was worth approximately $1.2 billion in 1956. By 1975, that number had climbed to over $4 billion. That kind of growth does not happen by accident. It happens because companies convinced millions of women that going barefaced was simply not an option. Brands like Estée Lauder, Avon, and Mary Kay were not just selling products. They were selling a daily obligation. Advertising agencies, including the powerful firm J. Walter Thompson, created campaigns that tied makeup directly to a woman's worth as a wife, a mother, and a neighbor. In the 1950s alone, cosmetic companies spent over $100 million annually on advertising, with American women as the primary target. Magazines like Ladies' Home Journal ran ads suggesting a wife should freshen up before her husband came home from work, as if a woman's face needed constant resetting like a clock. Hollywood accelerated this in ways that no ad campaign could buy outright. Stars like Marilyn Monroe and Doris Day were not just entertainers, they were visual blueprints. Magazine tutorials broke down their exact looks, step by step, telling ordinary women that this level of polish was not just possible, it was expected. Then television arrived and changed the equation entirely. For the first time, women were not seeing glamorous faces once a month on a movie screen. They were seeing them every single night in their own living rooms, in commercials, in sitcoms, on the evening news. The bar for what counted as presentable rose quietly and steadily without anyone announcing it. By the early 1960s, wearing a full face of makeup was not considered vanity. It was considered basic grooming, right alongside combing your hair. Etiquette columns of that era routinely told women that an unpainted face in public was almost as improper as showing up in pajamas. Going out barefaced could actually read as a signal that something was wrong, that a woman was sick or depressed, or, in the language of the time, letting herself go. That phrase carried real social weight. It was not just an insult, it was a warning. Now cross the Atlantic. In France and Italy, the beauty conversation was happening in a completely different room. French pharmacies had normalized skincare decades before American women discovered the concept. Cleansers, toners, and creams were not luxury purchases, they sat on shelves, right next to aspirin and cold medicine. The logic was straightforward. If your skin looks healthy on its own, you do not need much else on top of it. A licensed pharmacist in Lyon could recommend a skincare product the same way she would recommend a remedy for a headache. That framing skincare as something close to medicine rather than vanity changed the entire relationship French women had with their faces. There is a French word that captures this philosophy perfectly: soigner. It translates roughly as well cared for, not made up. The goal was never to look like a magazine cover. It was to look like you woke up that way naturally, even if it took 20 quiet minutes in front of the mirror to get there. Effort was allowed. Visible effort was not. Italian beauty culture leaned in the same direction, but with its own distinct flavor. The idea of faire la bella figura, making a good impression, was about elegance and confidence, not cosmetics. A perfectly tailored coat and good posture could accomplish more social work than a full face of foundation. Italian women often left their faces almost bare, while placing enormous attention on clothing, shoes, and the precise way a scarf was tied. Beauty was distributed across the whole presentation, instead of concentrated on the skin alone. The numbers make this cultural split undeniable. A survey conducted by the American Cosmetic Association in 1972 found that 85% of American women wore makeup regularly. In France and Italy during the same period, that figure sat somewhere between 20 and 30%. That is not a small gap. That is two almost entirely separate relationships with the same product category. Here is where the difference becomes most visible in daily life, not in the products themselves, but in frequency. For American women, in the 1950s and 1960s, makeup was a daily uniform. You wore it to church, to the office, to pick up the kids from school. It did not matter whether you were seeing anyone important that day. The standard was constant readiness, as if someone important might always be watching. European women separated their looks by occasion instead. A regular day might call for a skincare routine, and possibly a touch of mascara. Then a completely different, bolder look was saved for evenings, dinners, or events. That saved look meant something precisely because it was not worn every day. If you wore your most dramatic face every morning, it stopped carrying any signal at all. There is almost an economic logic to it. Treat your most striking look like a limited resource rather than a daily expense, and it lands harder when you actually use it. Both approaches were responses to real social pressure, just different kinds of pressure. American culture in this era placed heavy weight on constant self-improvement and always being on. That pressure showed up literally on the face every morning. The feminist movement that picked up speed through the 1960s began pushing back against exactly this expectation. As women started questioning whether a bare face was actually a sign of failure or simply a face, the beauty industry had to respond. The 1970s saw the rise of what were called natural cosmetics products, marketed as closer to skin than to paint, selling the idea of looking like yourself while still buying something. It was a contradiction the industry managed to sell very effectively. European culture, by contrast, treated effortlessness as its own kind of status signal. Looking like you tried too hard was considered almost worse than looking imperfect. The highest compliment was not, "You look amazing," it was closer to, "You look like yourself, but better." There is also an economic layer to this that often gets skipped. Post-war America had a booming consumer economy built on the idea that buying more products equaled a better life. Cosmetics were swept into that wave alongside washing machines and station wagons. Much of Europe was still physically and financially rebuilding well into the 1950s, which meant less disposable income for a full daily arsenal of cosmetics. A culture of less but better took hold partly out of necessity before it ever became a philosophy. What started as a practical limit became an aesthetic identity. Neither approach was really about vanity at its root. Both were about control, just expressed in opposite directions. One said, "Control the outcome by covering the variables." The other said, "Control the outcome by managing the foundation underneath and trusting what you have." By the late 1980s and into the 1990s, these two philosophies started bleeding into each other in ways that reshaped the entire global beauty industry. American women, worn down by decades of full coverage, began discovering French skincare brands quietly imported through department stores. Suddenly, glowing skin replaced flawless skin as the stated goal. Words like dewy and natural finish started appearing in American beauty magazine headlines where matte and full coverage had dominated for 30 years. At the same time, European fashion houses began embracing bolder, more glamorous looks on the runway borrowed directly from Hollywood red carpets. The supermodels of the 1980s and 1990s blended both worlds at once. French skincare underneath, American-style bold lips and sharp eye makeup on top, pulled out when the occasion called for it. That collision is where the modern beauty world was born. The idea of leading with skincare and layering makeup over it only when wanted, not daily, is now the baseline assumption of almost every popular beauty routine. Every time someone online talks about glass skin before discussing which foundation to use, They are repeating a French idea that took roughly 40 years to fully cross the Atlantic. As of 2023, the global makeup industry is valued at around $532 billion, according to Statista and Grand View Research. The products have changed. The sheer number of options has exploded. But underneath every current trend, the no makeup look, the skincare first approach, the your skin but better category you can still trace, the original split between the woman in Ohio who would not answer the door without lipstick and the woman in Paris who considered a healthy face decoration enough. So the next time you see a photograph of a woman from the 1960s in a full face of perfectly applied makeup, or a vintage French advertisement featuring a woman wearing almost nothing but clear skin and good posture, you are not just looking at two different styles. You are looking at two different answers to the same question. What does a woman owe the world when she steps outside? One culture said, everything, visible, every day. The other said, your best self, maintained quietly, and shown fully only when you choose to show it. Both were strategies for navigating a world that was watching either way, just written in two completely different languages.